We are 1 week away from, we're beginning the new month. We're going to commemorate this today in our services. So I thought it's a good idea to just have another think about, or just to raise our consciousness about what the calendar is about. Judaism has a very strange calendar. If you've ever opened a Jewish calendar and a secular calendar, you can see the two things are very, very different. And I thought it'd be interesting just to think through why these differences are there. Jewish time is centered around the sun and the moon, like all calendars have. Our basic unit of time, if you think of the most basic unit of time, it's the amount of daylight, sunlight that reaches the earth as the earth rotates on its axis. The day begins in the west. The day begins in the middle of the night. So you have some night, and it goes through to the middle of the next day. And since standardization, we've divided every single day in 24 hours. So you've got your days, you've got your nights and day as well. The Jewish calendar is ruled by the sun, but not exclusively, and you'll see why it becomes complicated. We needed, in the ancient world, you didn't have watches and clocks. You needed to have something that was firm, that could give you some sense of how time was moving. So we used the sun as something which was clearly observable, and we could see what a day was and when the night was. If you are unable to determine when night or day begins, it's difficult to work that out. So we said, no, it's fine. As soon as the sun sets, in Judaism, that's the end of the one day, and another day begins with the setting sun. And when in the morning, you know the day has begun when the sun appears over the horizon. What is interesting, by the way, is that the rabbi said, when does the day begin? When can you start your morning prayers? Has the day begun? You can only start your morning prayers when it's light enough for you to recognize your friend at so many paces. And I thought, what a lovely idea. Your day doesn't begin until you can recognize another person. Your day doesn't begin until you can recognize another person. And then what happens is, obviously when it sinks below the horizon, that's the end of the day. The secular days and nights, secular calendar does exactly the same thing. The first story in creation establishes a different unit of time, and that was the week. So right from the very beginning, we said there's a thing called a week. In the Jewish calendar, it's 7 days, and it's part of the divine plan that you should work for 6 days, and the 7th day is a rest, and then your week starts again. So we've got day, nights, and we've got weeks. Now we get into a bit of a problem. We know what a 12-month lunar calendar looks like. There are 365 days. Now, we use the lunar calendar because there was an easy way to tell when there's a period of a short number of weeks fitting together. Why that's important to Judaism is there's so many festivals that are tied up with where the moon is at that time. For example, on Pesach, that was the time that people left Egypt. They left Egypt when the moon was full, which is quite an obvious thing. If you're going to leave at night, you might as well be able to see where you're going to, as opposed to when the moon was in the smallest crescent. So there are a number of festivals which are tied in with the moon as well as the rest of the calculations. So now when you have a 365-day year based on the sun, how do you fit that in with the lunar calendar? So what they've done in the secular world, we've inserted an extra day every 4 years, so the calendar reflects the solar year. Because dividing the months up, you're always going to be a quarter of a day short. So every 4 years, you add an extra day. Now the solar calendar fits perfectly together again. The Gregorian calendar, which is standard, what we use all the time, has months which are more or less of equal length. And so that's how, more or less, 28 days, 29, 30 days, but more or less 4 weeks. It gets complicated with the Jewish calendar, which has to tie in with the phases of the moon. And the moon was a way of seeing the weeks. There are more or less 4 weeks in every month. And to try and get all these things to come together, it became a bit of a problem. If it doesn't come together so that the moon and the sun, the calendar is solar as well as lunar, you'll find funny things like Hanukkah is supposed to be, when the western, in the southern hemisphere, it's a summer holiday. In the northern hemisphere, it's a winter holiday. So that will be all wrong. Sukkot will be in the wrong time of year. We have a harvest festival of Shavuot, which wouldn't be when there's a harvest, because you're losing time every year based on only having a lunar calendar. You might have noticed that Ramadan, which is based exclusively on a lunar calendar without a solar calendar, Ramadan changes throughout the year. So every year it's 11 days earlier than it was the year before, because the 11 days difference between the solar year and the lunar year. The moon wasn't terribly important. The moon was very important in all parts of the Middle East because it gave you a sense of what blocks of time. But they didn't, because the Arab world wasn't agricultural. They didn't have to worry about seasons, so it didn't really matter. But since Judaism is tied closely to the seasons, we had to have the lunar calendar and the solar calendar working together. So we coordinated the traditional lunar calendar with the solar calendar, and we do that by having a leap year 7 times every 19 years. So we have a leap month 7 times every 19 years. There's Adar Rishon, Adar 1, and then Adar 2. So some years you'll actually see there's 2 Adars in a year. That will be one of the years where we're trying to correct the 2 calendars. And the distinction is to see to that the calendars fit correctly and that they're all tied up with the right holidays. So the fluctuations that we have all been ironed out quite cleverly by combining the solar and the lunar calendars. This idea of the passage of time is really important. Every evening, when we say the Ma'ariv prayer, which means the evening prayer, we remind ourselves that the day is gone. And I keep thinking about this. When I was a child, what marked time in my life was my birthday, because that was the only time you got gratuitous presents of all the sorts of things that you wanted. And it always carried on for so long. Once you had your birthday, it carried on for such a long time before you got your birthday again. I'd look in shops and say, I'd like a bicycle, or I'd like this. By the time my birthday came, it was something else. Judaism being very concerned with us marking the passage of time, so we don't have to wait a year. And what Judaism does is they mark days. When you say the Ma'ariv prayer in the evening, you say, we recognize that this day is over, and right now another day is starting. And I think it's a wonderful feeling that today is a new day, and it always starts at night and goes through the day. Today is a new day. The feeling that you get from that is you can start again. I think there's such value in starting again. A lot of us carry a lot of baggage. It was a bad day yesterday, a bad week, or bad year. Bad because you weren't on the top of your game, or because circumstances happened, or other people weren't on the top of their game, and you didn't give the best account of yourself. And such a lovely feeling to say, the day is over, it's now a new day. And all new days start in darkness, and they end up in light. As opposed to starting in the middle of the night and ending in the middle of the night. It starts as night falls, and you land up the rest of your day is in daytime and in light. And that's the basis of the Jewish calendar.